Our next speaker, it's always a pleasure to have him here at the International Cannabis. How many have you done? Is this the fifth, sixth? You've been at all of them. I think you've been at more of them than I have, which is pretty impressive. A partner from Gunner Cook, he's here to talk right now. Let's hear it for Peter Homburg.
Wonderful, good morning. At a very early morning here in Berlin. Thank you very much for this kind invitation to speak about the developments which we can expect in Germany after the federal election earlier this year. And the first question I have to you, have you ever heard the name Nina Warken? Who has heard the name Nina Warken before? Can I just? Yeah, okay, good. Have you heard the name Alois Rainer before? All right, since yesterday, these are the designated ministers for health for the new government in Germany and for agriculture for the new government in Germany. Both are conservative members of the Conservative Party, and that brings me to the subject today. What is the impact on the German legislation of this new government? And I may not be too optimistic about what's going to happen, but everybody is, of course, very and much looking at what has happened since the partial legalization in 2024. But, and that's typically for a lawyer, but we will see what's going to happen this year after the new government has been established. And what I want to do with you today is, typical German, here's my agenda, speak about the final results, who is in the future government, what did the election program say about the legalization of cannabis, and we all know, well, these election programs have, I would say, very straightforward and strict positions, which later on in the discussions regarding a coalition may be a little bit reduced. We have a look at that. Then, of course, we would like to have a look into the development of the German market, in particular in 2024, which has been so significantly changed. And then what will the future government will do? So I will take out my crystal ball and have a little bit of a look in what can be expected and what cannot be expected. What I can definitely say already now is things will change. How significantly, we will see. So have a look at the election results here, which is kind of concerning, in particular if you look into the very right-wing party, the AfD, and how much they have gained, 20.8%, which is a significant number. And the only real coalition which could have been built is between the CDU-CSU, the conservative parties, and the Social Democrats, which have been in the coalition of the government before. So altogether, CDU-CSU and SPD have 328 seats of 630 seats in the parliament, so they have the majority. And as you can see here, this is the coalition of the future government, and if everything goes well, these three parties will form the new government in Germany. Well, I say that because there are still the members of the SPD are voting for or against the coalition agreement, which has been discussed over weeks and which came out just recently. And if we look into the election program and what the parties have said regarding cannabis, then you can be in particular be scared if you look into the election program of the CDU-CSU by saying we will abolish the previous government's cannabis law. This law protects dealers and exposes our children and young people to drug use and addiction. Oops. The SPD, of course, very clearly stated they would like to go forward with their way of legalization as they have done before, together with the Free Democrats, which are not even back in the parliament. They haven't reached the 5% hurdle, and the Green Party. So let us have a look into the development of the German cannabis market before we come to a conclusion, or at least some crystal ball views what is going to happen to that market. So if we look into the development of the recreational market, just recall recreational has, legalization has two pillars. Pillar one, and we discussed that during the last ICBCs, pillar one is actually home grow of 3 plants per adult in a household, so you can do home grow. And then of course the cultivation in cultivation associations, where up to 500 members can cultivate together cannabis for their own use. It cannot be sold, it cannot be transferred, it's for their own use, as well as, of course, the home grow. You cannot sell that, you cannot give it to friends, you cannot even have a party with friends on that, at least that's what the law says, but that is for your own consumption only. If you look into the cultivation associations development, we have, as of December 31st last year, 83 applications which have been approved, 12 applications which have been declined, and 349 applications are still pending. This has changed in the last couple of months. So we have more licensed cultivation associations who can start or have started cultivation cannabis for the use of their members. Is that a big impact on the market, on legalization in general? I would say no, because if you have 20 or 30 or 100 members, it doesn't have a significant impact on the legalization. It's nice to have, but this first pillar is not what actually is the legalization which everybody expected. Pillar 2, and just to mention that, is the establishment of scientifically controlled pilot projects, very much like we have seen that in Switzerland on a smaller scale, or in the Netherlands, but this has not been implemented yet, for whatever reason. We have expected that already at the end of 2023. It hasn't been implemented in 2024, and now we have seen some kind of a development of the Ministry of Agriculture, where they have now asked for application for scientific controlled projects, clearly stating in their press release, this is not Pillar 2. And frankly speaking, me as a lawyer, I have difficulties to understand what it is. It must be something less than Pillar 2? Probably yes. Well, the applications there are companies who have filed for application for participating in these scientific pilot projects. They have, of course, not been granted yet a license, but they are under review. And we will see what Alois Reiner from the CSU will do with those applications, being the new Minister of Agriculture responsible for this part of the legalization process. He has been in the parliament for a number of years already, so he is an experienced politician, a butcher by profession. If we look into the German cannabis medical market, I think that is a real success story. It has been implemented and legalized in March 2017, and since then has very nicely developed and got a significant boost in 2024. Why? Well, cannabis and THC-rated products were taken out of the Narcotics Act and put into the 2 new acts, the KCANG and the MedCANG, as we call it, the Medical Cannabis Act and the Consumer Cannabis Act. And if you look at those figures, you can see that we have a significant increase in import of flowers in the last quarter, with 31 metric tons of import of flowers, mainly flowers, is a significant increase. And if you look into the total number for 2024, this is by far the highest import which the BfArM reported. The BfArM is the German FDA, reported for imports altogether. It's more than 72 metric tons altogether. If you look into the facts and figures for the first quarter of 2025, of course, official numbers are not yet available. It is even more in 2025. We can definitely expect maybe reaching the 80 or even more metric tons of import. Not counting, and that's important, the local and domestic production, which we have here by 3 companies, though we will see probably a little bit of an increase of those numbers, but these are the import numbers of the approved imports for medical cannabis into the German market. There are no official statistics with regard to prescriptions. How do these imports relate to prescriptions? Why is that so? Because most of the prescriptions right now have been granted to self-payers, and they are difficult to register somewhere. You can do that with those patients who are going to be reimbursed by the health insurances, but you cannot do that for those who are going to pay privately for it. So what has actually happened is that in the months following the legalization back in 2024, we have an increase in prescriptions and a shortage of certain medical cannabis flowers for existing patients with chronic illnesses, which caught the attention of the parties who at that point in time were already in the election mode. What also has happened is that the distribution via online platforms, bringing together patients, physicians, and pharmacies have significantly increased. You may have seen that, and we heard that yesterday. You can actually go online, register as a patient, have an online consultation with your physician, and then you get your prescription. And I think it's clear what we have seen as a kind of a shift from the illicit market more to the medical market, the adult use becoming medical. Otherwise, it's very difficult to understand why we have this increase. Is that something bad? No, I don't think it's something bad. Is it something which caught the attention of, in particular, the conservative politicians? Yes, indeed. And if we look into the platforms, they became more and more under fire in the recent weeks. We have seen, because we are representing a number of them, have seen cease and desist letters. We have seen various authorities asking questions about their relationship with the physicians, their relationships with the pharmacies, because you have to adhere to certain rules and regulations in that very restricted RX, and we are talking now about a market where cannabis is a prescription product, a prescription pharmaceutical with all the kind of different restrictions which the companies have to look at. So what are those facts? And let me point that out because it is so important. More and more cannabis is being distributed through less and less pharmacies who are working in this area. In particular, those pharmacies are benefiting right now who can actually use e-commerce, and they have to register, get a license for e-commerce, and then of course they can participate in that. And if you look at those platforms, these IT platforms, there are numerous pharmacies, but a limited number registered, where actually the patient, once he did have his consultation, and there are platforms who don't even ask for a consultation, you just fill in a questionnaire, send it to a doctor in Croatia, and get a prescription from there. Then get a prescription, and this prescription is then automatically, if the patient wishes to do that, to the pharmacy, and he has his product on the doorstep within 24, 48, sometimes longer, sometimes shorter hours, which is very convenient. You place your order, you go to a physician online, have a prescription, and then of course you have your product on the doorstep. So you don't have to go to Görlitzer Park in Berlin if you need to get your weed if you like to. There is of course a certain kind of restrictions here. First of all, these platforms should not give the impression that they provide any kind of medical service, which they can't. By law not, they should not. Then, of course, they have to comply with the professional law for doctors and pharmacies. That's complicated, you know. These restrictions are kind of a jungle where you have to navigate through. And, of course, no advertising for medical cannabis because that's an RX product. Well, if you go to the platforms, you can see beautiful pictures, prices, and descriptions for which kind of therapies can be used. And, of course, also with respect to the taste, the terpene profile. Well, of course, objective information is allowed. Well, where is the borderline to advertising for a product? Well, that's a subjective matter. Most of the time, even lawyers can't tell you because who knows what the judge thinks about it or not. So these subjective issues have to be taken into consideration. So coming back now to what can be expected from the new government. Looking at the market, now we're looking at what the government may or may not do. Well, we have a coalition agreement between the CDU-CSU and the SPD in place. It consists of 144 pages divided into 4,588 different lines. Cannabis can be found on page 89 in 3 lines of this document, where it says, Cannabis, in autumn 2025, we will conduct an open-ended evaluation of the law on the legalization of cannabis. Wow, this is significant. You know, 2 lines for, I would say, a not too neglected issue, because the legalization of cannabis was really on the agenda of the former coalition. Well, what they have done is actually, this is something which is, I would say, the deferring politics. You know, we defer that to the future. Well, if you look into the Consumer Cannabis Act, the KCANG in section 43, this is nothing new. The evaluation is already there. You know, the evaluation of the impact of the legalization process has been already implemented in that law. And so what we're going to expect here is the following. On October 1st, 2025, the first evaluation has to be carried out or has to be finalized, where the impact of the ban on consumption under Section 5 on the protection of children and young people in the first year should be evaluated. So what the new coalition did is, well, we defer that to what is going on, you know, and we'll see what the evaluation report will show. Then, of course, on April 1st, 2026, there will be an interim report on the impact of the legalization, then sent over to Nina Warken as the designated new Minister of Health, and who has not been really on the forefront of the politicians supporting the legalization. And then on April 1st, 2028, at the latest, a comprehensive report has to be submitted to the Ministry of Health. So that doesn't mean that in between we won't see any change. It could be that they say, well, this interim report is fine, but we will see what the final report will bring or not, or what is the consequence. I probably, from my point of view, and now I'm taking out my crystal ball, there will be consequences in autumn this year with regard to the legalization of adult use, in brackets recreational, and of course also to medical. So what has been done? This evaluation is already done. It's already performed by 3 institutions under the project EcoCan by the University of Hamburg-Eppendorf, the medical center there, in particular the Center for Interdisciplinary Addiction Research, the University of Düsseldorf, and the University of Tübingen. These 3 universities have already been asked earlier this year to perform this respective evaluation on the protection of children and young people, general health protection, and cannabis-related crime. These were the three main arguments for legalization, not only in Germany but also in Canada, with the consequence that you have to check whether A, we have a good protection or a better protection of the youth through the legalization. Secondly, we are going to increase the quality for the consumer. And thirdly, of course, do we attack the illicit market, yes or no? So if we look into that, what could be the possible consequences? I'm now coming to what most in this room are interested in, the possible consequences of this evaluation. As we have seen in the election program, it could be a complete reversal of the partial cannabis legalization and the reclassification of cannabis as a narcotic. Worst case scenario, I'm going to tell you, not going to happen from my point of view, thanks God. This is too much of an effort, and of course you would need a significant majority, not only in the parliament, but also in the Bundesrat. I don't believe that this complete reversion, the 180-degree solution, is definitely to be discussed. We could see some amendments to the cannabis laws on the Consumer Cannabis Act as well as on the Medical Cannabis Act. And of course, we can think about a compromise whereby you're going to exchange the implementation of the second pillar, which by anyway would be my favorite solution for the legalization, because you can gain data, you can actually spread cannabis out to a larger community, against the private home growing. Oh, is that going to happen? Probably not. You know, very difficult to put the genie back into the bottle. You know, who's going to control that now? Are you sending the police to Neukölln here in Berlin and have to check on their apartments how many plants are cultivated and whether they have been cut down after the change of the law? No, I don't think it's going to happen, frankly speaking. We have to influence, and I see Dirk in the audience as here, we have to do significant influence, interpretation, and lobbying for the limitation of the intended changes to a certain aspect. And if we look into what is going to be likely, as I said, the total reversal is not going to be likely. It is cost intensive as well, could lead to compensation claim, and so on and so on. So what could be the possible consequences? There is a possibility that the penalty-free quantities, which can be carried by individuals right now, which is 25 gram in public and 50 gram at home, will be reduced because 25 gram is a significant number, and we probably see some issues on the criminal statistics as well, which, by the way, you know, our criminal statistics was significantly reduced in the field of misuse of narcotics, in particular through the legalization. What can be also changed in the medical cannabis field is that the ultima ratio provision prescribing medical cannabis will be implemented. Today, we see that patients who are applying for reimbursement from their health insurance have to file a report, have to file an application to the health insurance together with their physician, who has to confirm that this is the last resort. This is the last therapy. Any other therapies have not helped, but cannabis is now the last resort. This is not applicable to those patients who are privately paying, who are self-payers. There, the physician can actually, as a first therapy, prescribe cannabis. Then, of course, the exchange of the official implementation of the second pillar for the ban of home growing. Well, the question is, rather than do we see the second pillar, the implementation of the scientifically controlled pilot projects, yes or no? This is difficult to answer right now at this point in time. Maybe we see it because there are, of course, opinions even within the conservative parties who really think that this may be the better implementation of legalization, gaining data, and also discussing then with the European Commission, who has actually stopped Germany for this full legalization, which we actually intended to do back in 2022, can happen, and maybe if we lobby it correctly, it will happen, hopefully, because it will give not only the consumers, but also the industry a real boost. What is also possible, and that's something which relates more to the cannabis platforms, is that the clarification of the term trade in paragraph 4 of section 4, paragraph 1, medical cannabis law, that these platforms are considered to facilitate the distribution of cannabis. By that, they would fall under the obligation to apply for a license. This can be done very, very quickly. And then, of course, these platforms have to apply for a license and, of course, then showing all the respective agreements which they have with the physicians and the pharmacies. We have seen agreements where the platforms are asking for 40% or even 50% of the fees the physician is going to bill the clients according to the respective fee schedule. That is illegal. That is totally forbidden. You can't do that. What you can do, of course, is you're paying the platform is going to pay the collected fees to the physician, and then are charging the physician a service fee for using the platform. That's something which we have structured together with our clients, which we see is a legal form, but you cannot participate either in the fees of the physician bill invoice to the patient, nor in the profits or the turnover of the pharmacies who are selling the cannabis according to prescriptions which are running through your platform. Also a clear no-go. So this solution could be something which the new government may consider. In a summary, the future government agreed to await the evolution of the CanKG. The decision of possible changes concerning the partial legalization of cannabis is at this point just postponed. The new government will most likely not reverse what has been done so far by the so-called traffic light coalition before, but we will see some nitty-gritty changes in the medical cannabis field. It will still remain a valid business. It will still remain a valid part of the pharmaceutical industry. I'm a true believer of that. And there are, of course, the majority of the even conservative parties that we won't touch the medical market, maybe except for some changes, smaller changes here and there. We will probably see a little bit or a change in the adult use legalization. Whether it will commence with the second pillar is still a question. And having said that, I hope you will remember the two names, Alois Reiner and Nina Warken, who will play a significant role in these decisions in the future. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you. Do we have, what time is it?
We have still.
Oh, no, that was it. That was perfect. Peter Homburg, everybody. Peter Homburg.